He's been amazing. I remember when I think it was Alan Dershowitz said one of the best, brightest students and debaters he's ever met in his life, or had the honor of teaching and being a professor to at Harvard Law, was Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. And it's been on display since Election Day as he lays out all of the constitutional issues surrounding all of this. Senator, welcome back. Glad you're with us. How are you?
Sean, I'm doing terrific. How are you doing?
These are busy days and nights. A little stressful, but that's life, right?
Yeah.
I really want to take a deep dive and really just open it up to you because, like our friend Mark Levin, this is really your wheelhouse. This is what you do, and you've done such a good job of explaining it, and just go through all of the varying issues that you see. And, I actually agree Senator Lindsey Graham got it right. If we don't fix sending out millions of ballots that aren't even requested in voter ID laws, I'm not confident Republican will ever win again the presidency. Never mind what would happen if we don't win those 2 Georgia Senate seats. But I want you to just lay out from a constitutional vantage point where you see this and why there's such importance here that people don't even want to talk about in the media or on the Democratic side.
Well, it's a very simple principle that an election is over when the results are final, when the votes have been counted, and when any of the legal challenges have been concluded. And had an election 8 days ago, but there are multiple recounts across the country. There is litigation in state after state after state. And we don't know what the result of that litigation is going to be. And the way our judicial system works, it exists to adjudicate claims, to hear claims, and the objective that everyone should want is to count every legal vote, but at the same time not to count any votes that were cast illegally, that were cast contrary to state law, or that were fraudulent. And right now the Trump campaign is busy litigating in state courts and federal courts across the country, challenging some of the ballots that came in. We've got to wait for our court system to resolve those claims, and that's going to be a matter of weeks, not months. We will see them resolved in the coming weeks, but the mainstream media doesn't want to wait for that. They want their guy Joe Biden declared the victor no matter what, and so what's going on right now is really bizarre because the media is just screaming that anyone who doesn't immediately herald Joe Biden as the victor is somehow undermining democracy. Well, that's just nutty. When the results are final, we'll respect what the results are, but the process needs to play out.
I think it's extremely well said. Let's look at the case pending before the Supreme Court in the state of Pennsylvania as it relates to the extension or the acceptance of ballots past the statutory legal deadline.
Yeah, so that is an important issue, and it is a pure issue of law, which if the Supreme Court reaches it, I think we will prevail. The question is, so the Constitution provides that state legislatures set the time and manner of elections and how presidential elections occur. And under Pennsylvania state law passed by the legislature, votes have to be received by Election Day. Now, the governor didn't like that. The governor's a Democrat, and the governor didn't like that. So he went to the state Supreme Court, which is also Democratic, and the state Supreme Court just changed Pennsylvania law. They decreed, never mind what Pennsylvania law says, never mind what the state legislature said, we're going to add 3 more days to the end of it and say that you can receive votes 3 days after state law says you can, and they don't even have to be postmarked if they're received. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just wrote that. I mean, just made it up. And so the question of law is the Constitution doesn't say the state Supreme Court, doesn't even say the state. It specifies the state legislature, which is unusual. Justice Alito wrote an opinion where he laid this out, and he described that the plaintiffs are very likely to prevail on this question. So on the pure question of law, I think there are likely 5 votes to conclude the Pennsylvania Supreme Court didn't have the authority to change state law. Now, here's the downside. It is not clear how many votes fall into that bucket of those received after Election Day. There have been different reports that they may be around 10,000. The margin right now that Joe Biden is leading in Pennsylvania is about 45,000 votes. And I think if it is unlikely to impact the results, there is a decent chance the Supreme Court won't take the case. If they take the case, I think the Trump campaign prevails. But if it's a small enough number of votes that it won't change the outcome, it wouldn't shock me to see the Supreme Court decline to take it at all.
So why would they miss an opportunity to weigh in on such a constitutionally important issue as that, Senator? Because you are right. And as always, it couldn't be any more clear in the Constitution that this power, this authority is granted to state legislators. And I also think in the long term, we've got to really examine going forward what standards we're going to have in every state, especially where there are Republican majorities in the legislature. They better start doing their job. Your thoughts?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court is unusual among courts in that it has what's called a discretionary jurisdiction. It can choose whether to take a case or not. In a given year, typically there are about 8,000 what are called petitions for certiorari. They're requests for the Supreme Court to take the case. Out of the 8,000 in a typical year, they take about 80. So they take about 1%. The vast majority of cases they don't take. And so there's a pretty heavy presumption among justices that they don't take cases unless there is an urgent reason to take it. If the issue of the state Supreme Court extending the deadline would alter the results in the presidential election, I think the court would take it, and I think they would resolve it pursuant to the Constitution. If it wouldn't make a difference, what the other side will argue, what the Pennsylvania governor's office will argue, is it doesn't matter how you resolve this case. The answer is the same anyway. And so in order to get the court to take the case, I think the Trump campaign has to combine that with other litigation challenging other ballots that are at issue, unless the universe of late received ballots is larger than some of the numbers reported. We don't have a firm number on it, so I don't know for sure. If it were 50,000 instead of 10,000, or if it were 100,000, I think the odds would be much higher the court would take it. If it's substantially smaller than the margin and the margin hasn't been reduced by other litigation, I think there's a real chance the court lets it pass.
There are other legal issues. One that has risen, and I hear a lot of people making this equal protection argument, is that the Democratic Party of Georgia, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and congressional committees all, filed suit as it related to absentee ballots in Georgia. They were able to negotiate a settlement which allowed the application signature, as long as it matched the signature on the ballot, to be considered valid and true, while day of voters their signatures were matched against a state database. It would make sense that if people wanted to commit fraud, that they would sign the application, get the ballot, and sign the ballot too, and you have two different standards for cross-referencing and affirming signatures. Your thought?
So that's been a claim that is in some of the lawsuits that have been filed. Both that claim and the other claim we were talking about a minute ago, the state Supreme Court's changing the legal standard, both of those are issues the Supreme Court has considered before, 20 years ago in Bush versus Gore. You and I have spent a lot of time on air talking about my new book, One Vote Away.
By the way, the book, I finally finished it. The book is phenomenal.
Thank you. And there's a chapter on Bush versus Gore. There's a chapter on, if you want to understand what the litigation is, what's going on in all these recounts, the book One Vote Away, which Sean, it's in its fifth week on the New York Times bestseller list, which I'm certain is driving the New York Times crazy. They hate putting your books on there. They
really do, don't they? But by the way, could the book be any more timely? It came out just at the time where, we had the battle over Amy Coney Barrett. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the chapter on Bush versus Gore takes everyone behind the scenes into the legal battle in Florida in 2000. One of the issues that we litigated in Florida was the state Supreme Court changing the date, which is the issue in Pennsylvania. And another issue, the issue on which we won at the end of the day in Bush versus Gore, was the equal protection claim. And I describe in the book One Vote Away how, I was there the night we were writing that complaint. And when we first filed it, it was at the time a pretty weak claim because it was anticipatory. We were saying, well, here's all the things that could go wrong, and if those went wrong, then it would violate the equal protection. I remember we're sitting there going, well, this is pretty weak, and it was the entire process of those 36 days. That equal protection claim got stronger and stronger and stronger each day because the Florida recount erupted into chaos. There were 67 counties across Florida, and every one of them had a different standard for the counts. And some were counting undervotes, some were counting 1/4, 2/4, 3/4 chads, and it was so chaotic that ultimately the Supreme Court concluded by a vote of 7-2, it wasn't even 5-4, it was 7-2, that what was happening, the chaos in Florida, violated the Equal Protection Clause, and then it was 5-4 on the remedy, the outcome, and a majority of justices said, enough is enough. You've counted the ballots 4 times. George W. Bush has won all 4 times. This case is over. That took 36 days. With the equal protection claims, you might lay one out now, but it's going to take the Trump lawyers really building the predicate and laying out the proof in court and prevailing on the litigation, and that's going to take, as I said, a few weeks for the judicial system to move forward.
Let me ask you one other important legal question. Senator Ted Cruz is with us. By the way, his book is a bestseller. We have it up we'll put it up on Hannity.com, Amazon.com, and bookstores everywhere. One vote away. All these swing states have laws very similar, like Pennsylvania. Partisan observers may observe polling locations, may stay until the time that the counting of votes is complete. Then they go into specific statutory language about there can be present during absentee, mail-in ballot envelopes while they're open. We know this didn't happen according to the testimony of so many and the affidavits being signed by so many. I seem to think there's a bigger case there than others. Your thoughts?
Well, there's a clear violation, and we know it occurred, and we know it occurred in multiple places. We know it occurred in Philadelphia. We know it occurred in Detroit. In Detroit, we know they used poster board and covered up and hid the ballot counting room. In Philadelphia, they took the Republican ballot watchers and they kept some of them out. Others they kept 20 feet away or 25 feet away. If you've ever tried to actually look at a ballot, you can't see anything from 25 feet away. Ultimately, the Trump campaign went to Pennsylvania state court, and they won in state court. They got an order from the state court that their observers had to be within 6 feet. Even 6 feet is tough to see a ballot, but I
don't think you can unless you have Superman-style vision, right?
Yeah. And so it's clear there were a significant chunk of votes for which there was no Republican ballot observer watching the counting. Now, on one level, that may seem like a procedural violation. What's the big deal? But the big deal is the reason you have the laws requiring observers from both sides, from both Republicans and Democrats, is it is a tool to prevent fraud, to prevent people from stealing the election. And here's an analogy I've used a couple of times. If someone breaks into a bank and shuts down all the security cameras, are they doing it because they intend to comply with the law and they don't intend to do anything wrong? No. The natural inference is if you're trying to avoid anyone seeing what you're doing, it's because you're doing something you don't want them to see. And so that, I think, is a serious claim. The challenge the Trump lawyers have in both state and federal court in Pennsylvania is what the remedy is, how you fix it. And that it's going to depend on the proof they lay out in court. The remedy might be recounting the ballots that were not observed, but we don't know if they were commingled with other ballots. The remedy might conceivably be excluding some of the ballots, but that's a high threshold. Courts don't like to do that. But what it's going to take is the Trump trial team building the evidentiary case and convincing a trial court and ultimately an appellate court.
It's so, and you know how hard it is more than anybody. I really could talk to you for hours on this. I want you to come back, if you will, one day this week, and maybe we'll just take questions from our listeners, because people are just dying to understand this. And your book, One Vote Away, could not be more timely in so many ways. And you've been amazing in helping to educate a lot of people. I got to give the great one, Mark Levin, has been great, who's also a big fan of yours, as you know. Thank you, Senator Cruz. We appreciate all your time.
Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you for everything you're doing. It really matters, particularly right now, keeping people informed. So I appreciate your leadership.
All right, you're Stu. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program.